I am 72 years old. For 55 of those years, I built my life around a single, unshakable principle: that a parent's love is a fortress, a bulwark against the world's cruelties, and that my children would always know its shelter. I worked until my hands were raw, until my back curved with the weight of 1,000 silent compromises, all so that David and Chloe could have more than I ever did. I believed this love was a currency that would mature, yielding a harvest of respect and kindness in my autumn years. Instead, my investment was met with a cold, meticulous humiliation, a ledger of my inadequacies kept in the heart of my own son. The kitchen light flickered that evening, a final sputtering protest before settling into its dull yellow glow. It was a light that had long since surrendered its ambition to be bright or welcoming. It was too cold to feel warm, too dim to feel alive, casting long, weary shadows across a room that had become the stage for my quiet undoing. The overhead bulb buzzed faintly, a sound I'd come to recognize as the soundtrack to my isolation. Like it, too, was tired of pretending to belong here. The tiles beneath my feet were clean, but not by their doing. I had scrubbed them on my hands and knees last Sunday, while the rest of the house slept in, lost in the soft, untroubled breaths of those who feel ownership over their world. My joints had screamed in protest, a symphony of creaks and pops that narrated my descent to the cold, hard floor. But I had stayed silent. Silence had become my most practiced language. It was past 7 p.m., and the sun had already dropped below the horizon, abandoning the sky to a wash of dark indigo and ash blue. Through the window over the sink, I watched the last vestiges of daylight melt away. A slow, beautiful death I felt in my very bones. The crickets had started their nightly chorus, a distant rhythmic thrumming of things that went on surviving, persevering, without any need for applause or acknowledgement. The house itself was quiet, but it was not a peaceful quiet. This was a strange, stretched silence, a vacuum that somehow carried weight. It was the silence of withheld words, of glances exchanged over my head, of a love that had been carefully withdrawn, leaving behind the hollow echo of its absence. It was a silence you could trip over. In the adjoining living room, my daughter-in-law, Sophia, sat curled on the expensive gray linen couch, her legs tucked beneath her. She was scrolling on her phone, her thumbs moving with fast, sharp, decisive motions. A soft, relentless click, click, click came from her long-polished acrylic nails tapping the glass screen. It was the sound of a world moving on without me. Across from her, my son David stirred his tea. The spoon circled the ceramic mug in a slow, steady, metallic rhythm. Clink, clink, clink. A quiet, monastic bell, tolling the hour of my despair. The air was a confused tapestry of smells. The sharp, astringent scent of lavender cleaner I had used, and the greasy, familiar odor of reheated pizza. Two things that did not belong together, yet here they were, forced into a coexistence, much like myself in this home. I opened the pantry door, its smooth white surface cool beneath my palm. I stared into its organized depths. I don't even remember what I had come for. Sugar? Flour? A can of soup? It didn't matter. What I do remember is that moment of suspension, standing there, hand resting on the frame, staring at the shelves I had stocked and organized, pretending not to hear the words that had been echoing in the caverns of my mind for days, weeks, months. Mom, you're still living under my roof. It's only fair. That word again. Fair. He had said it so casually, with the flat, unemotional tone of a man discussing a corporate merger or splitting a bill at a diner, as if he were stating a simple, irrefutable fact of physics, as if I hadn't raised him with every ounce of strength I had left after his father, my beloved Robert, was torn from us by a heart attack at 48, as if I hadn't slept on a lumpy second-hand couch for 3 years, my spine curving into a permanent question mark, just so David and Chloe could each have their own room in our cramped 2-bedroom apartment, as if I hadn't sacrificed weekends, potential friendships, even the ghost of a new romance, my own comfort, my own dreams. Also, they would never, for a single moment, feel the crushing weight of what we lacked. Now, I was the weight. I was a cost, a monthly line item, a number neatly written in the memo of a check. $200. He had started calling it helping with the bills, a benign, almost collaborative phrase, but it had quickly shed that flimsy disguise and become a stark, transactional reality. A line repeated with ritualistic regularity under my roof. The emphasis was always deliberate, a subtle hammer tap on a nail, each one meant to secure my place, or rather, my lack of one. It was a phrase designed to remind me that I was a guest, a tenant, a temporary occupant in the kingdom he ruled. And then there was Chloe, my daughter who lived here too, under this same expansive, oppressive roof. She ate the same food I helped pay for, used the electricity I contributed towards. Yet her name was never on the ledger. Not a single cent was expected from her. Her laughter, when it came, was a sharp, polished thing that filled the hallways. But it never seemed to reach me. It was the laughter of someone utterly secure in her position. She was the kind of woman who always wore matching, expensive workout clothes, a symphony of coordinated pastels and sleek fabrics, even if she never broke a sweat for anything more strenuous than lifting her coffee cup. Her perfume, a blend of citrus, and something elusive and expensive I could never name, hung in the air long after she had swept out of a room, a ghost of her presence that was more substantial than my own. Her massive, spotless SUV took up half the driveway, a metallic declaration of her territory. And still she would roll her eyes and sigh dramatically if my modest, aging sedan was parked a few inches too close to her domain. Yet, somehow she was seen as the cherished one, the successful daughter whose visits were a blessing. I was the one who paid for the privilege of my proximity. Every first Friday of the month, like clockwork, David would hold his hand out at the kitchen counter, his posture that of a landlord accepting a payment from a reliable, if slightly inconvenient tenant. Sophia would often glance up from her phone at this moment and flash a tight, approving smile. It was a smile that never touched her eyes. It was a social cue, an acknowledgement that I was finally behaving appropriately, that I had, for another 30 days, earned my seat at their table. I never argued. I never asked the screaming, obvious question, "Why doesn't Chloe contribute?" I simply nodded, my throat tight, and gave him the check. My fingers always trembled, just a little, a faint betraying vibration of shame and anger, but I would steady them with a breath, a small internal act of defiance. I told myself it was dignity. I told myself this was just a temporary arrangement, a bridge until I found my feet again after selling the old family home. But deep down, in the quiet, honest places I rarely visited, I knew this was the price of not being alone. This was the cost of proximity to the only people I had left in the world. Some evenings I heard them talking. I didn't try to listen. The house, for all its size, had its own strange acoustics, funneling whispers and murmurs down the hallways, as if the very walls were complicit in my education. One night, Chloe's voice, clear and carrying, floated from the living room straight to my bedroom door. "Well, she's basically your live-in maid. She should be paying us for that service, if anything." Sophia had laughed then, a light, cruel sound like shattering glass. She does keep the place spotless. I'll give her that. I stood frozen in the hallway, a ghost in my own home, waiting for David to say something, anything, in my defense. To say, "She's our mother." To say, "Show some respect." But all I heard was the sudden surge of volume from the television, drowning out the conversation, a digital wall erected to avoid the discomfort of my humanity. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan, its blades spinning in a lazy, slow-motion circle, a perfect metaphor for my own stalled life. My heart ached with something heavier than sadness. It was a colder, more familiar feeling, one I had known in the lean years after Robert died, but it was newly sharpened now. It reminded me of the winters in our old apartment, when the wind would whistle through the cracks in the window frames. I'd sit by the space heater, wrapped in 2 of Robert's old sweaters, watching my children sleep, their faces peaceful and trusting, while my mind raced with calculations I couldn't solve. How to fix the leak in the roof, how to replace the ancient water heater that groaned like a dying man, how to make a single chicken last for 3 meals. Back then, my love for them was my armor. It protected me from the cold outside and the even deeper chill of fear inside. It was a fierce, burning thing that warmed me from within. I truly believed, with the foolish faith of a mother, that this love was a kind of spiritual insurance policy, that it would compound with interest and carry me into a peaceful, respected old age. But here I was, paying rent to my own child. The irony was a bitter pill I had to swallow every single day. Thanksgiving was the turning point. The moment the fragile illusion I had been clinging to finally shattered. I woke up early that morning, long before the rest of the house. The sky was still streaked with silver-gray mist, the world holding its breath. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, the skin papery and thin under my fingertips, and put on my soft-soled shoes, the ones that didn't make a sound. I moved through the silent, sleeping house like a spirit, a memory of Thanksgiving's past. I threw myself into the preparations with a desperate, hopeful energy. I roasted the turkey exactly the way David used to love when he was a boy, stuffed with tart apples and fresh rosemary, the way Robert had taught me. I made the sweet potatoes with a crunchy brown sugar and pecan topping, the way Chloe had always favored. I carefully folded the green bean casserole into the large, blue-speckled ceramic dish David had made for me in a high school pottery class, a dish I was sure he had forgotten ever existed, its sentimental value invisible to him now. I baked 2 pies from scratch, a perfect lattice-topped apple and a smooth, spiced pumpkin. My kitchen for a few hours was a sanctuary of warmth and familiar, loving ritual. By mid-afternoon, the house was filled with the most glorious smells. Warm cinnamon, rich roasted garlic, yeast from the rising rolls, the savory scent of the turkey. It was the aroma of memory, of family, of 1,000 past joys. I allowed myself to believe, for a fleeting, beautiful moment, that this would be the day the scales would fall from their eyes, that they would see me again. Not the tenant, not the maid, but their mother, the woman who had built their childhoods out of stretchable meals, hand-me-downs washed until they were soft as clouds, and a love so vast it had its own gravity. Instead, as I was wiping my flour-dusted hands on a checkered towel, Sophia walked in. She didn't look at me, her eyes scanning the laden counters. "We invited some friends from the club," she said, her tone casual, administrative. "So could you eat earlier in your room? It's just going to be a little crowded in here." Crowded. The word landed like a physical blow. I was the crowding element. I was furniture that didn't match the new decor, an afterthought to be tidied away. David stood behind her, holding a stack of garish patterned paper plates. He didn't even meet my eyes. He just gave a small, tight nod, endorsing the eviction. Later, he brought a plate of food to my room. It was heaped carelessly, the turkey gravy already congealing at the edges. A plastic fork was tucked beside a roll. "No napkin. We'll clean up after. Don't worry," he said. And then he shut the door. A soft final click, without waiting for a reply. I stared at the food until it grew cold, the vibrant colors of the feast fading into a dull, unappetizing palate. I could hear the sounds of the party from downstairs, the clinking of glasses, bursts of unfamiliar laughter, the bass line of music I didn't recognize. It was a party from which I had been explicitly excluded, in the one place that should have been my sanctuary. That night, long after the last guest had departed and the house had fallen into a wine-soaked slumber, I crept back downstairs. I scrubbed the counters alone under the harsh fluorescent light. The wine glasses in the sink still smelled of berries and oak, a scent that felt foreign and mocking. The laughter of the party guests was gone, but another laughter echoed faintly in my ears. Not from this night, but from memory, From Thanksgivings 2 decades past, when we were 5 to a table crammed into our small apartment, laughing over a slightly dry turkey and somewhat burnt rolls, but laughing together our joy a tangible, glowing thing in the room. Now, the only thing that remained from those years was me. Still cooking, still cleaning, still giving, and now, paying. As I turned to go back to my room, my body aching with a fatigue that went straight to the soul, I noticed a plain white envelope on the counter, propped against the fruit bowl. It said, "Mom," in David's neat, precise handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a neatly printed list of utilities and shared groceries for the month. The total was calculated to the penny, 1,214.68. No note, no thank you for the meal, no smiley face, just numbers, cold and impersonal, like a ledger entry, a receipt for my place in their lives. I went back to my room, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of my bed. My knees ached with a deep arthritic throb. My back was a tight knot of pain. But the pain that settled deepest was quiet. It wasn't sharp like a cut, but dull and constant. A deep tissue bruise on my spirit that I kept pressing, just to feel something, to remind myself I was still alive. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the sky through the slats of the blinds turn from deep, inky black to a soft, tentative gray blue. And I listened to the sounds of a house I no longer belonged to. Somewhere in those silent, solitary hours, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a dramatic snap, not a crack of thunder, but a slow, glacial break, the kind that doesn't make a sound on the surface but fissures the foundation so completely that the entire structure is doomed. It was a quiet, seismic letting go. The awareness of the shift didn't come all at once. It had been building cell by cell for years. It was in the subtle change of language, the way David now referred to me. It was no longer Mom or Ma with any warmth. In conversations with Sophia, I had become her. "Can you check if she's done with the laundry? Did she remember to take her medication? She left the kettle on again." It was subtle at first, a linguistic sleight of hand I tried to ignore. But the more I heard it, the more it sounded like I was a problem to be managed, a variable in their otherwise streamlined lives. That small 3-letter word hurt more than I ever wanted to admit. It was a tiny, precise sting that kept returning, like the sharp, persistent poke of a splinter too deep to see, but whose presence you feel with every movement. And I did feel it. I felt it in the tightness at the back of my throat when I tried to answer his questions with a smile. I felt it in the hollow, empty space in the center of my chest when I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had somehow, without realizing it, become the burden they clearly saw me as. Every word David spoke to me now seemed to have a new tone. Sharper, drier, stripped of the soft padding of affection. There was no kindness behind his eyes anymore, no patient light. It was like I had become a stranger, a vaguely inconvenient acquaintance who had overstayed her welcome in my own son's world. Once, hoping to bridge the growing chasm, I had asked him if he wanted me to make his favorite soup, the creamy chicken and rice soup I used to simmer for hours when he was a child, sick with the flu. It was a soup that held the very essence of my nurturing, a taste of unconditional comfort. He didn't even look up from his laptop. "No thanks, Mom. We don't really eat that kind of heavy carb-loaded thing anymore." It wasn't the refusal that wounded me. It was the delivery, quick, cold, dismissive. It was the implication that my offering, my memory, my very essence of care, was outdated, embarrassing, something to be shed in the pursuit of their new, polished life. My hands had trembled slightly as I rinsed the pot I'd already taken out, watching the water swirl down the drain, carrying with it the ghost of a small, feverish boy who used to beg for that soup, who would curl on the couch trusting completely that his mother could make everything better. Sophia wasn't any better. She was never directly cruel. She was far too polished, too modern for such blatant displays. Her weapon was the subtle correction, the implied criticism, always delivered with a veneer of helpfulness. "I just prefer a cleaner smell in the laundry," she mentioned once, after I had spent a whole afternoon washing, drying, and folding a mountain of their clothes. I came downstairs later to find her re-washing the entire load. That same day, she pulled out a second, identical container of laundry detergent and labeled it Sophia in bold, black marker, a silent, stark boundary line. "No offense, Helen, but I like the towels fluffier. You have to shake them out before you put them in the dryer." She'd said this with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. A smile that didn't reach her calculating eyes. She didn't have to say more. Her message was clear in the way she moved through the house. A constant, quiet force of correction, adjustment, and replacement. She would refold the towels I had already put away, reorganize the kitchen cabinets I had just cleaned, and never, not once, offer a word of thanks. I began to internalize her silent rules. I started folding the towels twice, trying to achieve the impossible standard of fluffiness she demanded. I stopped using the lavender-scented fabric softener I had loved for decades because she had wrinkled her nose at it once. I stopped offering to help with dinner preparations because even the way I chopped an onion, a skill honed over 50 years, seemed to irritate her. My method too slow, too rustic for her gleaming, professional-grade kitchen. But no amount of compliance changed my status. I was still treated like a shadow, something inconvenient, something they couldn't morally throw away but also couldn't bear to have in the light. Every time the first Friday of the month approached, a low dread would begin to simmer in my stomach. David's reminder about the rent felt like a ritual humiliation. "Hey, Mom, just a reminder. The month's almost up. You got the check ready?" He always said it loudly, always in the kitchen, often when Sophia was present. It was a performance, a demonstration of the power balance, a way to show her and me that he was the man of the house, the provider, the one in charge. I would nod, my jaw clenched tight, quietly hand over the check, and then retreat to my room without a word, my cheeks burning with a shame so profound it felt like a physical heat. But inside, beneath the shame, I was burning with a different fire. It wasn't just about the money. It was the way he made me feel small, for needing a place to stay, as if I hadn't provided him with a roof over his head for the first 22 years of his life, as if I hadn't skipped lunches for a year to save up for his class trip, hadn't worn a winter coat with a broken zipper for 3 seasons so he could have a new jacket. That check was more than money. It was a physical manifestation of my diminished worth, a monthly receipt confirming how far I had fallen in his estimation. One Saturday, I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing a sticky patch of spilled juice from the floor near the refrigerator. Chloe happened to walk by, her high heels clicking on the tile. "Oh, Mom," she said with a light, airy laugh that held no real humor. "You really don't have to play Cinderella. We have a vacuum for that, you know." From his seat at the kitchen island, David chuckled. Not because it was genuinely funny, but because it was a joke at my expense. And in this new dynamic that seemed to be permitted, because no one else in that room believed I deserved the dignity of not being mocked for my efforts. I didn't answer. I didn't look up. I just kept scrubbing, focusing on the circular motion of the sponge, on the faint, clean smell of the soap. Because if I stood up, if I met their eyes, I might say something I would regret. Or worse, I might finally break down and cry. And I was determined not to give them that satisfaction. The floor was warm and damp under my knees, but my hands were cold, wrinkled and red from the soapy water. I focused on each individual tile as if it were a tiny shield, something I could polish into a state of perfection that would somehow make me forget the imperfection of my standing. Then there were the little, unspoken rules that solidified into law. The labeling of groceries was the most blatant. Jessica started with her oat milk and Anna's hummus, but it soon expanded. One morning, I made myself a piece of toast and used a single scant spoonful of Sophia's expensive organic strawberry jam. Later that afternoon, I found a new note on the refrigerator, printed in her flawless handwriting. Please respect labels. Everyone buys their own. I stared at that note for a long, long time, my hand still holding the fridge door open, the cold air washing over me, raising goosebumps on my skin. It felt like a public declaration of my otherness, a sign that said, "You are not part of this unit." I never touched the jam again. I started buying my own small jar, which I kept on a separate shelf in the door. A tiny, pathetic declaration of my own. Evenings, which I had once cherished as a time for family connection, became the worst part of my day. I used to sit with them in the living room, watch television, try to make small talk about their days, about the news. But slowly, insidiously, they began watching shows I didn't understand. Loud, frantic reality programs and cynical comedies filled with cultural references that were a foreign language to me. They would laugh at inside jokes I wasn't privy to. And when I tentatively asked what was funny, Chloe would often pat my arm and say, "It's okay, Mom. It's just not your kind of thing." Her tone was one of gentle condescension, as if explaining something to a very small, very slow child. Eventually, I stopped going into the living room altogether. I stopped trying. The effort of pretending I was welcome was more exhausting than the loneliness. I began to spend more and more time in my bedroom. That small beige-walled room became my entire world. My narrow bed, my little window with its view of the neighbor's fence, my small stack of well-loved books. It smelled faintly of the lavender essential oil I dabbed on my wrists, and the faint, musty scent of old paper. The lighting was soft, emanating from a yellow ceramic lamp I had brought from my old house, a relic from a happier time. The walls were bare except for a floral print calendar I had stopped updating months ago. It was the only place in the entire 3,000 square foot house where I didn't feel actively in the way. David used to knock on my door sometimes, but never to talk, never to connect. It was always transactional. "Do you know where the duct tape is? Can you watch the kids on Saturday? Sophia and I have dinner plans." Never. "How are you doing, Mom?" Never. "Thank you for watching the children." Never. "I love you." Once the twins, Liam and Emma, had spilled grape juice on the new living room rug. I heard the commotion from the kitchen and came in to see the purple stains spreading. Sophia looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing, and her gaze landed directly on me. "Helen," she said, her voice tight. "Next time you give them juice, maybe do it in the kitchen, okay?" I hadn't even been in the room when it happened. I opened my mouth to say so, but the words died in my throat. She didn't care about the facts. She cared about assigning blame, and I was the most convenient target. I swallowed the lump of injustice, hard and painful, and said nothing. I simply fetched the carpet cleaner and began the tedious process of scrubbing, my silence a blanket smothering my voice. That was the thing about it all. The silence. Not my silence, but theirs. They never apologized. They never explained. They never sat me down and said, "This is why we are treating you this way." They never had to. Every word, every sigh, every exchanged glance, every labeled container, every calculated rent reminder carried the same clear message. You are here because we allow it. Be grateful. Stay out of the way. Don't make a fuss. I started waking up earlier, at 5 a.m., long before anyone else stirred. I would make my single cup of coffee in the quiet, dark kitchen and sit at the table alone, staring out the large window at the empty, sleeping street. The hum of the refrigerator was my only companion, a steady, indifferent drone. The world outside still felt normal, still held the promise of a life. The wind still moved the branches of the oak tree in the front yard. The sky still performed its daily miracle, shifting from soft, bruised pinks to a clear, hopeful gold, and finally to a vast, untroubled blue. It was a reminder that there was a world beyond these walls, a world where I might not be invisible, where I might still be someone, Sometimes I'd hear a robin chirping its morning song, a sound so simple and pure, and I would feel tears rise, hot and sudden, behind my eyes. They were tears for the person I used to be, a woman people smiled at when she walked into a room, a woman who held birthday parties in a cramped backyard, who ironed shirts with care, who was listened to, who was thanked, a woman who mattered. Now I was just someone who paid rent, a line item, a ghost. I tried, God knows I tried, not to keep a mental scorecard of the slights, but they accumulated, each one a tiny scar on my spirit. The weary sigh David emitted when I asked a simple question about his work. The sharp, disapproving look Sophia gave me when I accidentally opened a package addressed to her. The way David's voice would raise half an octave when I couldn't figure out which remote control turned on the new sound system. Even Chloe's well-meaning but cutting jokes. "You're not on Instagram, right, Mom? It's probably too complicated." Each comment, each look, chipped away at the edifice of my identity until I felt myself shrinking, quietly disappearing, becoming smaller and quieter to take up less space, to be less of a nuisance. And still I smiled when Liam and Emma ran up to hug my legs, their small, sturdy arms around my neck. Their unconditional, sticky-fingered love were the only moments I felt truly seen, truly human. Still, I cleaned the dishes no one asked me to clean. Still, I wrote the checks for money they had never earned. I wanted to believe it was all done out of love. But I knew, in the quiet, honest core of my being, that it was something else now. It was habit. It was fear. Fear of what would happen if I stopped. Fear of where I would go. Fear that maybe, just maybe, they were right, and this was all I was worth. But deep inside me, in a part of myself I had neglected for decades, something was slowly, stubbornly, waking up. It was a part of me that remembered my own worth, not loudly, not with anger or theatrics, but with a quiet, growing, unshakable certainty that I did not deserve this, that I, Helen Marie Wilson, at 72 years old, deserved peace. I deserved respect, and maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to stay to earn it. The final quiet cataclysm didn't happen all at once. There was no big explosion, no final dramatic argument that shattered the china and the family ties in one fell swoop. There was just a single ordinary moment, so quiet and still, it was almost holy, when everything inside me simply stopped accepting the unacceptable. I was folding laundry in the kitchen. The towels were warm and fluffy from the dryer, but my hands felt cold and stiff. I was halfway through stacking the third pile when David walked in, his phone pressed to his ear. He didn't see me at first, or perhaps he didn't register my presence. I had become so good at being unobtrusive. His voice, casual and clear, broke the sterile silence of the room. "Yeah, she's still here. What can I do? She's got nowhere else to go." The words did not land like a slap. They were colder, sharper, more surgical than that. They were a precise incision, severing the last frayed thread of hope. He wasn't whispering. He didn't lower his voice in respect or shame. He said it plainly, openly, as if I were not standing 5 feet away, as if I were a piece of outdated furniture he was tired of but felt obligated to house. My hands paused mid-fold, a blue bath towel suspended between them. The soft cotton suddenly felt as heavy as lead. My knuckles, swollen with early arthritis, stiffened, and my chest tightened in that quiet, internal way it does when your heart plummets, but your pride won't allow your face to show it. I kept folding, my movements becoming slow, mechanical, but something inside me, the last flickering candle of denial, went silent, and a profound, absolute clarity took its place. That night, I lay in bed with the lights off, the room illuminated only by the faint, orange glow of a street lamp filtering through the blinds. My body ached in its familiar constellation of pains, the dull, deep pull in my knees, from crouching to wipe the baseboards, the sharp pinch in my lower back from scrubbing the inside of the lower kitchen cupboards that afternoon. I hadn't been asked to clean them. I had done it because I couldn't bear the thought of hearing Sophia sigh, and then re-clean them later, her silent judgment a more potent criticism than any shouted word. The room was dim, the shadows from the ceiling fan blades rippling slowly across the ceiling, like the lazy fins of deep-sea creatures. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the urge. I just remembered. This feeling of being a burden, of having nowhere to go, was not new. It was an old ghost, one I thought I had banished a lifetime ago. A memory, sharp and vivid, surfaced from the depths. I was 17, standing on the creaky wooden porch of my childhood home. A small, damp envelope in my hand. My father, a man worn down by a life of hard labor and disappointment, stood before me, his calloused hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes avoiding mine. "You need to leave, Helen," he had said. That was all. No explanation, no warmth, no "I'm sorry." Just those 4 final words. Inside the envelope were $60 in crumpled bills and a slip of paper with the address of a distant cousin I had never met. A stranger. I had left that day, my small suitcase in hand, my heart a raw, bleeding thing. And I had built a life. I had met Robert. I had had children. I had sworn, with every fiber of my being, that my children would never, ever feel that same yawning chasm of rejection. And now, decades later, the same toxic sentiment was echoing from the mouth of my own son. She's got nowhere else to go. I had spent my entire adult life, every ounce of my strength and love, trying to build a fortress of belonging for David and Chloe. And now, I was the one locked outside the gates, my presence tolerated as an act of charity, my past sacrifices rendered invisible. That was the moment the shift became irreversible. It did not come with rage or with tears, but with a cold, clean clarity, the kind that only arrives after you have been exhausted for too long, after you have given until you are a hollow shell. It was a clarity that sat down beside me on that bed, in the dark, and whispered a single undeniable word. Enough. The next morning I rose before the sunrise. The world outside my window was still draped in the deep, velvety black of night, but I could see a soft, promising band of indigo beginning to climb over the silhouettes of the rooftops. The birds had not yet begun their morning chorus. The house was wrapped in a profound, almost sacred silence. I put on my robe, the fabric soft and familiar, and shuffled into the kitchen. I made a single cup of coffee. The rich, dark smell of the grounds, a small, comforting ritual. The aroma filled the room, warm and grounding, like a memory held in steam. I sipped it slowly, standing at the window, watching as the first delicate fingers of pink and gold began to stretch across the horizon, painting the undersides of the clouds with fire. And in that tranquil, hopeful light, I made a decision. I had savings. It was quiet money. Money I had tucked away over the years like a squirrel hiding nuts for a winter I never truly believed would come. It was composed of birthday checks from my late sister that I had never spent, small earnings from a part-time bookkeeping job I'd done for a local shop years ago, a modest tax return I had never mentioned to anyone. I had told myself it was my just-in-case fund. The case had now arrived, with the subtlety of a sunrise. Later that day, while Sophia took Liam and Emma to a play date and David was sequestered in his upstairs office, glued to the blue light of his laptop, I retreated to my room and made my calls. I spoke softly into the phone, my voice calm and steady. I took notes in the margins of my old planner, my handwriting a neat, practiced script. I asked careful, precise questions. I was no longer a timid mother. I was a woman conducting business, the most important business of her life. 2 days later, under the pretext of visiting an old friend, I drove to the coast. The salt tang in the air grew stronger with every mile, a cleansing antidote to the stifling air of my son's house. I turned down a quiet, tree-lined lane and saw it. A small cream-colored villa, the kind of pale yellow-white that seems to glow gently from within, especially when bathed in sunlight. The shutters were a faded, weathered blue, like the sky after a storm. The small front porch was framed by overgrown rosemary bushes, their scent sharp and clean, and a tangle of wildflowers nodded their heads in the sea breeze. I breathed in deeply, filling my lungs with air tinged with salt, lemon from a nearby tree, and the damp, rich smell of earth. It was the smell of freedom. The real estate agent, a kind-faced woman named Brenda with gentle eyes, met me at the door. She told me the previous owner was a widow, a woman about my age, who had spent her last years reading on the back patio, surrounded by the climbing roses she had planted and nurtured herself. The house was quiet inside, not the heavy, judgmental silence of David's house, but a peaceful, welcoming stillness. There was no hum of a giant television, no frantic footsteps from above, just the soft, sighing sound of the coastal breeze slipping through the slightly cracked kitchen window. My sensible shoes made soft tapping sounds on the cool, terracotta-tiled floor. I let my fingers brush the edge of the countertop. Cool, smooth, genuine stone. No sticky spots, no crumbs from a late-night snack I hadn't been part of. I walked from room to room, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. The living room was small, with a fireplace. The bedroom looked out onto a small, private courtyard. The bathroom had a deep, clawfoot tub. I didn't say much to Brenda. I just listened. I listened to my own breathing, to the absence of critical voices, to the stillness that felt not like emptiness, but like potential. I bought it. I paid in full from my just-in-case fund, and I told no one. It was my secret, my sanctuary, my tangible act of self-preservation. Over the next week, I packed my life slowly, methodically, a few boxes at a time, like a thief in the night stealing back her own soul. I didn't want much, just the essentials that held the echo of my true self. My photo albums, their pages soft at the edges, filled with the smiling faces of a past life. A small box of letters from Robert, tied with a faded ribbon. My mother's quilt, its patches worn soft as velvet from decades of use. My yellow ceramic lamp, and after a long moment of hesitation, the chipped, lumpy clay mug David had made for me in second grade. A lopsided heart painted on its side, in garish red glaze. I held it in my hands, feeling its imperfect weight, and for a moment, the ghost of the small boy he had been wrapped around my heart. Then I placed it carefully in a box, swaddled in a sweater. It was not an invitation for him back into my life. It was an acknowledgement of the mother I had been, the love I had once so freely given. David didn't notice the slow disappearance of my belongings, or if he did, he said nothing, perhaps attributing it to my attempts to declutter. Sophia barely looked at me at all that week, absorbed in her own world of spin classes and social planning. Chloe hadn't visited in over 10 days. The house, for all its physical warmth, had grown spiritually colder, even as the spring weather outside turned gentle and warm. Then came the morning of my departure. It was raining, not a raging storm, but a soft, steady, gentle drizzle. The kind that paints the sidewalk a darker shade of gray and makes everything smell of wet leaves and fresh, clean soil. I dressed in my most comfortable slacks and a warm sweater, and I put on my coat. I held my large, sturdy umbrella in one hand. My single large suitcase and 2 cardboard boxes sat by the front door. A single check, my final rent payment, rested on the kitchen counter. David walked in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He was wearing the same tired plaid pajama pants he'd had for years. His voice was groggy, thick with sleep. Going somewhere. I looked at him, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with a calm, steady gaze that seemed to truly see him for the first time in years. I saw the man he had become, and I released the boy I had been clinging to. He blinked, a frown creasing his forehead. You didn't say anything. I don't need permission, I said, my voice even and quiet. Yet it seemed to fill the silent kitchen. The sound of my footsteps on the stairs made Sophia appear. She was in her plush white robe, a towel wrapped like a turban around her hair. Her eyes, sharp and always assessing, flicked from my suitcase to my face, then to the check on the counter. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone a mixture of confusion and a faint, emerging alarm. "I'm moving out," I said. She paused, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drawing together. "Wait, what? Just like that?" I nodded, a small, firm gesture. "Just like that." I picked up the check from the counter and laid it down again, this time placing the salt shaker on its corner to keep it from curling. "This is the last one," I said, looking directly at David. "You won't have to remind me again." They did not speak. David opened his mouth, as if to form a word, an argument, a question. But then he closed it again, his jaw working silently. Sophia shifted her weight from one bare foot to the other, her arms crossed over her chest. But she too said nothing. The silence that had once been my prison was now their own. I turned, my hand closing around the cool, brass handle of the front door. I opened it. The air outside was cool and fresh, washed clean by the rain, and it was full of that vibrant, alive smell that only a good rain can bring. As I stepped out into it, lifting my umbrella, I felt something miraculous happen. I felt lighter, as if I had been carrying a great, invisible weight for years. And with each step away from that threshold, a piece of it was being washed away by the gentle rain. The car ride to the villa felt like waking up from a long, troubled dream. The windshield wipers swept back and forth in a gentle, hypnotic rhythm, clearing my view of the world. Outside, life went on in all its messy, beautiful glory. I passed grocery stores where people pushed carts filled with sustenance for their families. I saw couples huddled together under a single umbrella, sharing its shelter. Children in bright yellow raincoats were hopping over puddles, their laughter muffled by the glass, but their joy unmistakable. There was color, there was movement, there was life, and I was moving back towards it. At the villa, I pulled into the short gravel driveway. The sound of the tires crunching on the stone was a satisfying final sound. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the sudden quiet, listening to the rain patter on the roof of the car and on the leaves of the lemon tree. Then I got out, didn't bother with the umbrella, and walked to my front door. The key turned smoothly in the lock, a solid, well-made sound. I stepped inside. The light inside was soft, filtered through the gauzy white curtains I had already hung on my last secret visit. A peaceful, diffused glow filled the space. I walked through my new home, opening windows as I went. A clean, cool breeze flowed in, carrying the scent of the sea and the damp earth, and with it, a profound, welcoming quiet. I walked barefoot across the cool, clean tiles. My footsteps did not echo in a vast, empty space. They simply were, belonging to the floor as much as the floor belonged to me. I filled the kettle and made myself a cup of tea. I used my chipped, second-grade mug. I sat at my small wooden table by the window, watching the rain drip from the rosemary branches. A small, brave sparrow, its feathers fluffed against the damp, chirped loudly outside, and then landed on my windowsill, cocking its head as if to look me over. I smiled at it, and then a sound rose up from somewhere deep within me, a sound I hadn't heard in years. I laughed. It was a soft, surprised, genuine laugh, a release of pressure, a rediscovery of a forgotten music. I had been so quiet for so long, I had forgotten what my own joy sounded like. I could have fought. I could have screamed. I could have demanded a family meeting, pointed out every moment of disrespect, listed every sacrifice, weaponized my pain. But I had chosen something far more difficult, and in the end far more powerful. I had chosen to leave with my dignity intact, not because they had earned my silence, but because I finally, truly knew that I did not owe them my pain. My story was not theirs to write anymore. Now I sit by this window each morning. I drink my tea. I breathe the salt air. I listen to the gulls and the wind in the trees. And I remember, piece by piece, who I am. I am Helen. I am a widow. I am a mother. I am a grandmother, but I am also a woman who loves the quiet of the morning, the smell of old books, the taste of strong tea, and the feeling of belonging to herself. I didn't run away. I walked forward, one steady step at a time, out of the shadows and into the light. And I am not lost. I am home.